Your nightly news with Joe Palmer begins now.
Tasmanians have joined nationwide protests causing chaos and disruption as part of the global movement Extinction Rebellion. Protesters rallying for climate action took over parts of Hobart this afternoon with a mock funeral procession, while dozens of arrests have been made in other cities.
Dressed in black, carrying a casket, Extinction Rebellion has a clear message.
Today we're having a funeral, a symbolic funeral to represent the generations that won't exist because of inaction on climate change.
Protesters marched through Hobart, drawing attention to their climate cause, one they're calling an existential crisis.
We're creative, we're fun, we're disruptive.
It doesn't appear like the politicians are willing to take the action necessary to meet the scale of the catastrophe.
In North Hobart, commuters faced with banners and placards as activists undertake their movement, Truth to Traffic. Similar dramatic scenes felt nationwide.
What do we want? When do we want it?
In Melbourne, around 60 people arrested after blocking cars and trams.
Oh, look, we are sorry that we have to inconvenience people, but we have tried everything and the government will not listen, so we need to take action.
In Brisbane, a man caused major commuter chaos, suspending himself on the Story Bridge.
This is a desperate time and desperate measures are needed.
Now threats, activists will use drones to disrupt flights to and from Brisbane's airport.
The oceans are rising! No compromising!
In Sydney, protesters were dragged off the road of oncoming traffic, multiple arrests there too.
The insects are dying and our soils are degrading and eroding. Our once great river systems and our wetlands are dry.
While activism is peaceful here right now, Tasmanian members, around 600 of them, are willing to face the brunt of the law, planning to escalate if the government doesn't heed demands.
We have no other choice. We feel like it's our moral duty to rebel as citizens when our government's failing to protect us.
Activists are comparing the cause to the suffragettes, Gandhi and the civil rights movement. More protests are planned tomorrow.
And if they're not paying attention now, they will.
Louise Hedger, 7 Tasmania News. A week of climate change protests is escalating as it reaches its finale. Today, activists in Tasmania had a specific target in mind, our politicians. But one senator hit back, calling the group a bunch of extreme rabble.
Members of Extinction Rebellion singing their message through the streets.
We're on a planet, it has a problem.
Visiting local, state and federal government offices in Kingston today to demand action on what they're calling a climate emergency.
We really want to hold governments to account for the climate and ecological crisis.
This is an emergency. The scale of the emergency demands significant action, and the politicians' response is just not up to scratch.
Later in the afternoon, a funeral-themed procession took over Davey Street, blocking traffic for a short time after the activists visited the Hobart office of Senator ABETZ.
The government has, to some extent, taken some action, so we want to sort of give them some warning and the opportunity to take actions. And if they don't, then we'll step it up.
We are in fact world leaders in this area, and so for people to be seeking to demonstrate and assert that we aren't doing enough just shows what an extreme rabble they actually are.
Activists warned this week's peaceful actions in the state are just the beginning, saying their protests will become more disruptive, mirroring protests across the country.
I mean, that's really our only option. We feel like we have no choice. It's our moral duty to rebel, so civil disobedience is at the core of this movement.
The government says the demonstrations are doing more harm than good in the eyes of the public.
The Extinction Rebellion is really an extreme rabble that are causing dislocation and disruption to their fellow Australians, so they're doing their cause a great disservice.
The week of climate rebellion is due to end tomorrow. Ebony ABBLITT, 7 Tasmania News.